start and we can do both. Evelyn, do you want to do your question?
So, speaking of the coyote killing contest and the ban on traps,
Yes.
the coyote killing contest made it to the House, and in the last hours didn't get a vote because of, I assume, strategy, the more, what Speaker Eagle deemed the less controversial bills he wanted to get done, so we focus on those, my guessing. And it's frustrating. There's a value to presenting and getting that far because you do build momentum, but there's also a huge frustration about the hours put in and then feeling like, was this a waste of time? And what would you advocate for on the bills that you feel most passionately about? Is it to go to the leadership ahead of time and saying, is this DOA or can this be heard? Will this happen? Or just working through your allies like APD, APNM, so that we don't make your jobs harder, but we also know that these bills are going to be serious and may make it all the way up to the floor and get some.
So on the coyote killing contest last time around, that you're right, you're exactly right. Made it to the House. The bill was sitting on my desk because I was going to present it on the House floor. And I kept asking the Speaker, can we do it? Can we do it? And we didn't get to do it. And there were three reasons that I was aware of why the Speaker didn't put it on. One was it was a controversial bill. And the Speaker, the House rules are a little different than the Senate rules. The Speaker doesn't have complete ability to skip around the way he might like to. And he was concerned, he was trying to work with Republicans. We do a couple Democrat bills, a couple Republican bills, sort of keep the flow going. That if he put that bill on, they would withdraw authority for him to do that. And in that case, we would just have to go in order. So there was that. There was also the final hours, and because it was a controversial bill, it was probably going to be a 3-hour debate. So there's that. And the vote count on that bill was going to be pretty tight. To get that bill passed, as Peter said, it wasn't a strictly partisan bill, it was kind of this urban-rural divide bill. I think it has a lot better chance this year because I think it's gone through the Senate before, and I think it can get through the House. Of course, the fourth reason is we were going to send that to the governor, and she probably wasn't going to sign it.
Yes.
So there were all those sort of considerations going into it about how it was going to be heard. I will tell you, I was sitting there, I had my file, I had my notes, I had my outline, I was ready to go. The legislator to my left was Bill Gomez, who's a Democrat. He showed me his amendment to that bill. Bill is very pro-ag, and he was going to try to put on an amendment that put a bounty on coyotes. So every time you shot one, you got $10 or something like that. And he was a Democrat. He lost the primary, he's not coming back. They make the change, so it's going to be different. I think in terms of expressing your concerns, your priorities, your passions, I think you got it right. Go to the leadership who's local, go to your legislators, make sure they know. I'm doing tomorrow night. I'm doing a lobbying forum with Sierra Club, and really, my message, the best person to lobby is your own legislator, because they want to hear from their constituents.
So and I always say, you guys, you can come right on the floor of the Senate or the House before we gavel in. You can come walk right on there. Everyone else is, the lobbyists are all down there, so come see me. I'd much rather see all of you than all those lobbyists. But it's an amazingly accessible process. But you're right, it's frustrating, and I will tell you, if you think it's frustrating for you, spend 8 years, giving up all the things that we give up with our personal lives, our professional lives, pass all these bills, and then actually you get them through only to have a governor decide, oh, you guys are from Santa Fe, therefore I'm vetoing this. So that's where it's been. So You know, I do think it makes a huge difference to have a governor that will sign the bills, because you don't want to, there are bills that are challenging for members, and if it's not gonna get signed, it just, there's no reason to always force. Estelle Berger, right up front.
Hi, with respect to early education funding, what I heard said was, well, we have the option of doing a constitutional amendment, which then wouldn't go into effect until 2023, or we could tweak tax policy to do it presently. What about a both-and approach, where we do the amendment and tweak tax policy for kind of a bridge financing until that amendment could take
I
effect?
think it's a very reasonable question, and I think the governor, in her on, I guess it was Wednesday of last week, when she gave her speech after being sworn in at the convention center, I think her word was, let's take a little pinch, you know, out of the permanent fund. So we've done it before. We did it with Governor Richardson in 2003 or 4, before I was in the legislature. It went to the voters, it barely passed. It was supported by Senator Domenici, the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, and it passed like 51% to 49%, so it was close. So I'm not opposed to that, and I think, but I'm gonna tell you that there are colleagues who feel very strongly about this in my chamber, and so I want to be realistic with people, and I respect, you know, they feel strongly about it, and if they're not willing to go there, then it's, okay, we all agree this is important, so let's go figure out how to fund it. It may not be tax policy, you can go raise the money to do this. There are so much low-hanging fruit in all these exemptions, deductions, internet tax. There's gonna be a whole bunch of things we're gonna look at, putting a little progressivity back into the income tax, and we've basically got a flat. So there's things that we can look at, but it's a valid point, and I appreciate it.
So just a couple of quick things on the land grant permanent fund. It's paid, you know, oil and gas royalty is paying to it. Last I heard it was at $18 billion, the market.
It's over.
Is it over that?
Yeah.
Well, it's land grant is one of the 3 funds.
One of the funds.
The total is
It's the main
well
one.
over 23 billion.
In recent years, the payout was, I think, 5.5%, and that actually sunsetted and it went down to 5. You know, so we're not talking about raiding the principal, and that's what the opponents like to say, oh, you're gonna raid the land grant permanent fund. No, we're gonna increase the payout as we've done before, and the purpose of the land grant permanent fund is education. This is education.
Greg?
All right. I was wondering, I've been hearing about an omnibus election reform package that Ivy Soto is writing, and I wanted to ask, is this sort of an omnibus form of the single bills that have been introduced, or is it entirely different content? And
No.
what's in it?
Yeah, so,
Basically.
well, it's always a good question with Senator Ivy Soto. He is an amazing expert on election law. And he passed the bill that has resulted in a lot of local governments now being able to choose to avoid having elections in March. So the city council here in Santa Fe is now moving its elections to November in off general election year. So 2019 will be the election in November, and trying to consolidate a whole bunch of elections. My understanding is that the bulk of what he's doing, and it's a huge bill, is tweaking and making corrections and fixing unintended consequences that came out of that bill. So so you may know more than I do, but I don't think it's,
Find it out.
yeah. So Senator Ivy Soto is going to speak next week to the Democratic Party. So he'll be at the Peace and Justice Center on Cerise Road, and that'll be the perfect time to go get the exact specific, because I don't want to misspeak, but it's going to be omnibus in the sense that it's going to tweak a lot of election code more technical issues. I don't think it'll be the big substantive change that was passed previously.
All right. Thank you.
Next up, Rosanna Dill.
Hi, Senator Warren.
Hi there.
Mr. McQueen. So I work in state government. I work for Department of Health. So one thing that I'd like to have you guys look at when you look at sort of the whole revenue process and the the way that's gonna work is, right now, it's sort of, my understanding is we kind of have a situation where our tax code is rather distinct from any other state's tax code in ways that businesses don't like to deal with. So if we can sort of smooth that out, I mean, I think a part of the whole economic development is like, if you're, well, I can't do business in New Mexico because there's gross receipts tax on services. And what I was wondering is, and I've been wondering this for a while, because I review procurements for the state, and one of the things that happens is there's supposed to be gross receipts tax, sales tax, if you will, gross receipts tax, on services that somebody buys. If you hire an architect, they're supposed to charge you gross receipts tax on their services. And how that cascades and how that works, sometimes it may, I think it's an impediment to economic flow in the state. One of the things that I see is that when that money comes in, a lot of times when it's the state doing the procurement, we charge them tax and we pay it back. A lot of state contracts reimburse the vendor for that tax that they pay. So it's kind of a circular thing. And I was wondering, is there a way you guys can get the data from DFA? How much reimbursed gross GRT have we paid out, so that when you make the argument about changing how GRT on services works, that you can say, hey, you think we're making this much money, and on paper we are, but we're actually paying that back to these people who are state contractors. So, excuse me, we're not making that much money. So, I'm just advocating, can you talk to DFA, get some data to make that argument?
Well, it makes perfect sense. In the last 8 years, the answer I would say we probably can't get the data. But now we're going to have new administration, new DFA secretary, and we can get that kind of data. But it's a huge problem. I mean, basically, if you're coming into Mexico, you better hire a really good lobbyist to get an exemption from the gross receipts tax. That's the standard practice, because if you don't, the rate's really high and the base is really narrow, it's very regressive, and it means that everything that we all are buying, we're paying this high rate, and there's pyramiding. So when you're in a business chain, you're paying it on multiple. So it's tax reform, we didn't talk about that, is going to be a major focus. We've been working on it a bunch. We have to get the gross receipts tax down. The problem is we've become so dependent on gross receipts tax that now to reduce the gross receipts tax by 0.25% takes $200 million in revenue. So think about that. So to get the GRT down 0.5%, it's $400 million. So we're either going to take $400 million of existing money or find $400 million in loopholes, and we still only lower it by 0.5%. That's how reliant we've become. And it's because and it's goods and services. It's very unique, and we are number 50 for property tax in the state of New Mexico. So it's a tax code that needs a ton of work. It's really hard to do that with a governor who signed a pledge to never raise a tax. Because when you're fixing the tax code, there's going to be winners and losers, and that's where we were in the last administration. I don't think we'll be there in this administration. And so, it doesn't need to be an end of game, increase per se, but to get the GRT down, you're going to have to close loopholes. Internet sales, Supreme Court finally is going to let us do that. It's crazy. Small businesses are hurting. Combined reporting, I've talked about forever. We're the one western state that these corporations can gain their expenses. It's nuts. So maybe we've done a piece of that. Maybe we can get the rest of that. But it's a great point. Great point.
And I think, that I'm talking about money and oil and gas money. If we want to improve our schools, we want to improve these programs, we need reliable money. And that point's been made to us in the legislature, that we need, it's not just we can go run and spend this oil and gas money, we actually need recurring revenue. So we are going to look at those things.
Gail Funk.
Yes, as a little plug-in hybrid driver who would much rather be driving an all-electric vehicle, what are the prospects of making it legal in New Mexico to have Tesla service and sales centers?
I mean, it's a great question. The Tesla people came and talked to me, I'm certainly sympathetic. What the issue is Tesla sells their cars directly and services their cars. And we have a law in New Mexico that basically says if you're gonna sell cars in New Mexico, you have to go through a dealership. And so we have dealerships all over New Mexico that make money because, they have the protection of this law. That's kind of a law that, in my mind, like when it was adopted, probably was a bad idea, but it was adopted. And now we have these dealerships that, are providing jobs, they're investments, they're important businesses here in New Mexico. And we gotta be really careful, I think, about pulling the rug out from under them. And to me, I think of this the same way I think of our liquor licenses. You can buy and sell a liquor license and they go for like $300,000 a piece, a full license, which is crazy. That was never the intention. But if we told the people that own them that you can't sell them, or if we phased it out, or if we just started issuing more liquor licenses, you would have a bunch of businesses that invested $300,000 in an asset that overnight would be not worth that. So we have to be very careful about how we approach that. There is a draft bill that Tesla gave me that's sitting on my desk. And it's, and all the stuff I'm trying to get ready, that's on the list for me to try to digest and understand. So we're looking at it as the best thing I can say. Maybe Peter has a better
So
answer.
I spent a whole bunch of time, it was a lot of fun having a couple of Tesla owners come with the auto dealer representatives, and they drove them around in the cars and let them drive their Tesla cars. And Randy Trainer, who's the lobbyist, and the head of the auto dealers, again, were all in my office 3 or 4 years ago. That's when we first started having the discussion. We're one of very few states where you can't do service or sales. Tesla has to send a trailer from Denver or Phoenix to go pick the car up in Santa Fe and bring it back up to have it serviced. And so I think as more and more people are buying Model 3s, which are a very affordable electric car, the pressure is going to increase. It may take until there's a Tesla pickup for it to finally break the gap. I've heard that said. But it's a serious issue and one that other states have figured out. In Utah, I spent some time with a majority leader in the Republican leader in Utah, and he said, I just got everybody in the room and the auto dealers sat down with Tesla and we figured this out. And so there's a lot of other states have done this without the world ending. In California, where it started, they figured it all out, but it's a scary thing for the auto dealers for sure. And so I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm also sympathetic. This is an amazing new product that's come along, and it's kind of like we never used to go to a direct store to buy your phone, and things change, and so it's a technological change, but we need to work on this, and I'm hopeful that this is one where Governor Lujan Grisham will get everybody in the room and let's figure out some kind of an exemption. Another option that is being discussed by Tesla is going and locating on tribal land. So you want to start getting into they're serious. They're serious. All right. Dan Potter.
It's easy to hate coyote killing contests. One, because it's a barbaric process, and everybody kind of feels it. And the other one is it doesn't work. All of the coyote control measures that have been done over the decades during that time, coyotes have dramatically expanded their range. So it's a barbaric process and it doesn't work. If that's the case, how about between 10 and 15% of New Mexicans not having health insurance? Isn't that a barbaric situation? And isn't that also showing that it doesn't work? There's a bill that's going to be coming out. Speaker Egolf has already voiced support for it and says it's one of the biggest bills coming down the pipe this year. I'd like to ask you guys if you guys support the Health Security Act, and will you do what you can to get it maybe to one committee and help it come through? It does all of that and it saves the state money.
So I'll just say that this is a bill that was started by my predecessor in the House, Max Call, and Lucky Varela. It's been around, it's single payer, it's his version of single payer. I have voted for it every single year I've been in the legislature. And I agree with you, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And let me say, gun safety, there's a whole range of issues here that are super important, and we're gonna be dealing with them. And so we weren't, by not discussing something didn't mean it wasn't on the list of what's important. I will say this, the best thing that Governor Martinez did was to sign the Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
That, in terms of the number of uninsured in our state, had a dramatic consequence in a positive way. And so that doesn't mean, though, that as the federal government rolls back, provisions of the Affordable Care Act, that we don't need to have this net. I've always said we already have universal health care, quite frankly. It's one of these 15%. You're sick enough, you're showing up at St. Vincent's, and they're gonna treat you. And that just increases the cost of the whole system because it's reactive instead of proactive health care. So the Medicaid expansion was important. Health Security Act is important. I don't think it's gonna go to one committee because it is a tricky, complicated bill. But I certainly support it and have voted for it. And again, I think it's gonna have momentum. You've got leadership in both chambers supporting it. The question is, when you get into it, what's the fiscal impact? What does it look like? How it's implemented? What's the position of the new administration? Those are all things that will come into play, but it's gonna be in the discussion for sure.
Representative McQueen.
And you raise a good point, comparing it to the coyote killing contest, which to me is a moral issue and is really quite clear. It's a really pretty simple bill. Obviously, the Health Security Act is a much more complicated bill, much more important to people, more people, and it touches on a big segment of our economy. I've never voted on the bill. It's never gone to a place where I needed to vote on it. I am certainly open to it. But we also, one thing I think is going to be interesting in this legislature is because the legislature is all blue and the governor's office is blue, we have a real obligation to make sure the bills we pass are good bills, that they work, that they're sustainable. We can't just vote for something because it's a good idea, a good concept, a concept we support. We need to make sure the nuts and bolts are there and it's something that actually works. And so I've been to one presentation on the Health Security Act. I tried to get another one. I had a conflict. All I can say is I'm absolutely open to it, but I need to hear the bill. I need to see how it works. I need to better understand it before I vote for it.
So we got 8 more people on the list, about 20 minutes, and we'll do a little mini rocket right here. Rainey.
Yeah, I'm glad that it came after Mr. Potter because that bill, Susan brought Mary Feldblum to the whole Democratic Party at 1420. And because of me meeting her, I had her out to Eldorado. I love that bill. And I know several groups are working on it. I think this governor is open to it. It's a form of single payer, started in 1994. It's exactly like the California bill that got defeated last year. I think we can do it. And I'm gonna ask each of you, go online if you can. What's the name of the site to go to, Greg?
What's it?
The bills.
Oh, nmlegis.gov.
Yeah, nmlegis.gov. Read it. Everybody would be insured with health care. So I agree with you on that, and that's one of the bills. The other is education. I went from Peter's committee, the conservation where I lived. I had a cot, and I stayed there, I saw the game commission, it was something. And then I gave up. He left. So I've been with education since then. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, about 8:30 in the morning. It's urgent that you be there if you can. If you know about education, you have grandkids. Bill Sewells made a statement one day, and it was impactful. He said, the number one best investment for any state, anywhere in this country, is early childhood education. It's true. And as a teacher, I made Who's Who in the World, Who's Who in Everything. It is the most important thing, and his kids are gonna be able to go to that, because I'm determined. So anyone who's, interested in going, wants to join with a committee, because we speak in those committees, and there are some good people on that committee. Thank you, Peter. So that's what I want to say. There are other bills that matter, but that health and education are big time.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Mr. Ernst, my buddy from many years ago.
I have two sort of simple questions,
Yeah.
and then I'd love to hear you guys kind of tease out a bigger picture sort of thing. I'm wondering if there's anybody talking about electric vehicle tax credits? Is that anything that's coming next show? And I'm also here to ask for support for the Tesla bill, because I have a reservation on Model 3, and it's insane that taxes will be coming to Colorado instead of New Mexico, and Ford and Chevy can continue to sell their cars through their dealerships if they'd like to, but I want to buy my car a different kind of way. But what I'd really love to hear you guys talk about is we're moving to renewables, we're encouraging renewables, which is awesome, and then we're trying to wean off of fossil fuels, which pays all our bills. So how do you see making that transition from, getting off the teeth but it's still encouraging the renewables, but maybe using them for the, future funding? So how does that balance work? If you encourage electric vehicles, we don't pay our gas tax. So all those things, I'd love to hear you guys talk about that.
So, the transition is important. And I see us going to a renewable energy economy. And that's why I'm so worried that we're getting all this money from oil and gas, and that we need to plan for the future. Another thing we haven't mentioned yet is climate change. I think we need to get off fossil fuels for the sake of the planet. I personally don't think, as a political matter, we're going to do that by prohibiting the extraction of fossil fuels. I think we're going to do that by an economic transition where the renewable energy is more cost effective. And we're already seeing that with coal, and I don't think it's that far down the road that that's going to be true for oil and gas as well. On the electric vehicles, my first 2 years, we were fighting against, the Republicans wanted to place a surcharge on electric vehicles. Not a credit, but actually a charge. And their rationale was they're not paying their fair share of gas tax, and they're using the roads.
Which is true.
How we take care of our roads based on gas tax, absolutely. Another scary thing about renewable energy, and we're pushing there with the RPS, and there's going to be a rooftop solar bill, and there's going to be a community solar bill, and there's going to be a bill to encourage charging stations. So we're doing all the things to push renewable energy, and it's not nearly as lucrative for the states. So we're sort of, in the long run, we're sort of undermining that gravy train that we've come to rely on, and that's scary. So for the past, certainly my past 4 years, and probably longer, we always talk about the need to diversify the economy. We always talk about that. Governor Martinez talked about it all the time. I don't think she did anything to actually achieve that. So that's something we really need to do. I met with some people yesterday. They were talking about a state bank, keeping New Mexico's funds, not giving into Wells Fargo or Bank of America, creating a state bank the way North Dakota has, so we can invest in New Mexico and we can do things to diversify the economy. The governor, in her inaugural address, talked about the film tax and film program, and that's really been a winner for New Mexico. And I think that's a sustainable business here. So looking at ways to develop our inherent resources away from oil and gas. And the one last one I will mention, which the governor has also been open to, is an office of outdoor recreation. We don't do nearly as much outdoor recreation as neighboring states like Colorado and Utah, and we have beautiful resources. I personally think that ties into the wildlife bills, that if you're out hiking or camping and you get to see a fox or a wolf, that jacks up the value of that outdoor experience in a big way. So that's something I'd like to see us work on. And I think we're, you know, we know this, we talked about this. What's really interesting to me is we're all blue, we've got 4 years, we need to start changing things. You know, in 4 years, if we haven't done anything, there's no excuses.
Well, and we're 8 days in. I mean, and I can't stress enough how big a difference this is, because, you know, when I chaired the Senate Conservation Committee, we were rolling back the RPS. That passed the House. The issue of oil and gas drilling in Galisteo, you may all remember, many of you that. I got myself right into that as a brand new state representative. There was a bill to preempt all the local governments. It passed the House. It was one vote away from coming out of the Senate Conservation Committee. It
When he
was.
says it passed the House under Republican
That's
control.
right.
So it's not
He didn't vote for it. He didn't vote for it. But it just shows you, though, that again, that's that comment I made about status quo being a win. And so this is a whole new arena. Tax credits are challenging. We haven't done any since 2015. I actually did the last one, which is an extension of the sustainable building tax credit, which is I did 10 years ago with Richardson, and it was phasing out. And it's for green building and efficient houses and for water conservation and construction. It's worked great, and the home builders were on board, and I think that's why she signed it. So definitely we need to look at electric vehicle incentivization, but also contribution, because I mean, we haven't raised the gas tax since the early 1990s. And the roads, it drives me nuts driving, you know, St. Michael's is a state highway, Sirius is a state highway, Paseo de Peralta. It's like, what is going on? And so, and there's a tension between the city and state, we're gonna work on that. But there's lots to do, but I think Matthew gave a good overview of the challenging, kind of all the above as you transition.
One super plug-in, I attended a meeting with Stephanie Garcia Richards, our new land commissioner, who's definitely opening a position for outdoor recreation. And she very much wants volunteer input, and so you don't just have to go, I mean, you can get a job there too if you want. But, you know, if you have a voice and a passion for that, there's a lot of places you can apply that, and you've got a chance to actually make an impact now.
She's also banning trapping on state land
Yeah.
effective immediately, so. Julia.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
First, I need to give a little kudo to my boss, Ed Moreno, because we are introducing a resolution to support the Health Security Act, so for State County. And, but I wanted to talk about, this is a one-time deal. Every 10 years we do the census. The 2020 census is coming up. New Mexico gets $6 billion a year from the number of people per capita. And so that money goes to roads, it goes to food insecurity, it goes to education, it goes to all of these things that we're talking about. So we have a challenge this year because they are, it's in litigation, but they're thinking about putting a citizenship question, asking if people are, if they're a citizen, if they're a legal citizen or not, which kind of keeps people from being counted, from answering the census. So I've been tasked to work with Santa Fe County to try and get our complete count committee and get a marketing campaign going. And we're working with all of our leaders in our community. And then I'm also working with the New Mexico census funders. So we're trying to get, and I'm sure you've already met with some of our folks, and I'm hoping that you will put money into it. It looks like it's depending on how much money we put into it per capita. So if it's $2, if it's $25, if it's $75, you're gonna get a better outcome. And so it's really based on the first outreach to each of the respondents. So I'm hoping that you will see the importance of that. It's a one-shot deal for this time. It's not, we don't need ongoing funds for it. But I think it's important for our state to not be number 2 in the lowest response. So I put that out to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, and it's super important for the reasons you state. And we actually have put money in already.
Right.
We managed to get it in, and it was slid into the legislature's budget in a way that I don't think Governor Martinez found it.
It was well spent.
comment. It
Good.
went to UNM, they were able to
Yeah,
get those addresses and get, like, I don't know, several thousand, tens of thousands of new addresses.
so just make sure that I'm sure the asks is being made, but let us know where, well, figure out where it is and get the number right.
Well, we think that the funding really should go to to nonprofits in
Mhm.
small communities, so that, because they're on the ground working with our people.
Good.
Thank you.
Terry?
Thank you, Representative and Senator. I want to talk about health. I'm the Executive Director for the New Mexico Alliance of Health Councils. Health councils really got decimated at the hands of taking back the money from the state over and over and over again. Health councils, if you don't know, is the community voice in every single community in New Mexico, and we have 6 tribes who also participate in this, to say what their needs are in their communities, rather than having the feds or the state tell us what you need to do to be healthy. So it's these communities that bring their own voice forward, and we're asking for, we have 2 bills. We have one for funding and one for looking at the way that health councils actually work in New Mexico these days. But my big piece too is I hope that you will be open-minded to the health bills that are coming forward. There are several, I know of 3 that are going to be talking about Medicaid buy-in, the health security for all New Mexicans, and then there's another one that's also looking at health security for New Mexicans. And I've worked with the Konalma Foundation now, and they've talked to people all across the state, experts as well as people who are trying to survive with medical issues, and are finding that they have to sell out everything they own in order to be able to receive the help. So those are all coming forward, and Konalma is looking at how to fix the ACA for New Mexicans, the way New Mexicans are saying they want to have an affordable care process happen for them. So I really hope you'll look and listen to a lot of those folks that are coming forward. Thank you.
Good, thanks for the heads up. We've got 4 left, we have 8 minutes, so we're good. Joe Eidner.
Hi, I'll be very brief. The UN report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, gives us about 10 years to turn around our greenhouse gas emissions. We know that Washington, under the present administration, is not leading. So, are the states, specifically New Mexico, going to be able to do enough in that short time to turn things around? You've talked about some of the issues already, and your plate is full, and you're supporting a lot of these great ideas, but are we doing enough? Can we do more?
So, I think that's a great question. I think about that a lot. What can we do at the state level? I'm always looking for ideas. As I said before, I don't think we're going to ban fracking. I don't think we're going to put significant restrictions on extraction of fossil fuels. I'm hopeful that the coal plants are going to close, and that's part of that securitization piece, is to make sure that happens. The approach that I have in my mind, which feels inadequate to me, is to promote renewable energy in every way I can, and that's the large scale resources, both solar and wind, the community solar, the rooftop solar, and then there are other pieces like the charging stations and other ways to make that whole system interconnected. I'm always looking for other ideas about what we can do at the state level. So if you have specific suggestions, you know how to get a hold of me.
Well, and I think what you're seeing at the federal level with the Green New Deal, I mean, it's really exciting to see all these new faces and young faces, and in the House, there's a whole bunch of new members that I think are going to really push. We haven't had such a big turnover in the Senate, but we can't wait.
No.
So I agree with you, and it's my kids are 21 and 25, and the youngsters, it's frightening kind of where we are, and so 8 days in, I feel like we're at least moving forward versus where we've been, and that's a good thing. Elaine Duncan.
Oh, yes. I'm with Moms Demand Action, Good Sense in America.
And I was just wondering, every year we show, every 2 years we show legislation. It seems like nothing gets moved past committee. So background checks at gun shows and that sort of thing. What do you think our chances are this year?
So,
Getting that through?
I think the chances are way better than they've been in a long time. So I am a sponsor with Senator Richard Martinez from Espanola of the background check bill. We did pass the bill dealing with domestic violence restraining orders that passed both chambers and went up, and Governor Martinez vetoed it. It was surprising because of lots of police agencies supported it. But I go back to the question earlier about the frustration of going in, you feel like you're doing all this work and it's not happening. Well, the domestic violence bill is a perfect example of, okay, so we did all this, we did a lot of compromise, the bill goes up and it gets vetoed. So then the members come to me and say, why in the world are we gonna do any of these bills? Well, now we got a whole different story. We've got a governor that will sign these bills, that's gonna be engaged on these bills. It's also, the background check bill this year is much better than it was when it was introduced 2 years ago. It was too broad. And there was a national strategy to kind of introduce something that was big and went all over the place and then put it on the floor and amend it down, and that doesn't work in our world. And so I think this year it's much more targeted. And so I think you're gonna see those bills move, and I think you're gonna see some floor votes on a variety of gun safety legislation. It's long overdue. So don't give up.
Yeah.
Because you guys have been great, and then that's that kind of passion and advocacy. If it backs away, I assure you that the gun, lobby will slide right in there. But I have seen, since Guns in the Restaurants, which is the last kind of pro-NRA bill that we did, which is a horror story, which never should have passed, but I won't go into the specifics. But we've really shifted gears, so it's kind of been this neutral period where nothing's passed, and now the question is, can we push, and we're going to see on reasonable, that have a balanced approach that just makes total sense.
So I have a list that I keep because I jot ideas down, and I think some of these things are going to start to pass. As Peter said, we passed the domestic violence bill. I think we're going to repass that. I've got bump stocks, high capacity clips, domestic violence, trigger locks for kids, assault weapons, waiting periods, minimum age, background checks, both private sales and mental health issues, unsecured gun criminal liability, stolen gun reporting, red flag laws, 3D printed guns. I think we're going to start to see progress. Probably not all at once, but I know people are already working on these bills.
Barry Silver.
Thank you. I want to thank each one of you for coming out tonight. I know that we're just one stop on your circuit because you've got a lot of responsibilities. Apart from sitting here, my investment in time is about 12 minutes round trip. So sincere thanks. When I was in college, people used to talk about underdeveloped countries and developmental economics. Then a bit beyond that in grad school, they talked about the emerging nations, newly freed colonies. Now,
See where this is going.
And then there was the third world. Now I'm not sure any appellation is really assigned to that. But all of those countries had the same thing in common. And that was that they were single crop countries or single mineral countries. Sometimes they had two. I don't see much difference between New Mexico and those. Are there any plans to do something?
Yeah, I mean, the diversification issue is critical.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that. When you take the money coming out of the permanent fund towards education, which is coming from oil and gas, 45% of our general fund dollars are based on oil and gas. It is just skyrocketed. And and we're on a roller coaster now, it's going up, but we were there when it was, screaming down, and it's frightening. So it's absolutely critical that we figure out how to diversify our economy. I think that the whole renewable piece that we talked about, film is another big issue, and I really think that's something where New Mexico has done it well.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't talked about cannabis. There's gonna be a discussion about legalizing cannabis. On the east side of the state of New Mexico, it borders Texas, where there's no recreational or medical cannabis. All I know is I spent some time up in northern New Mexico. When I drive into Antonito, for a while I couldn't get gas, but there were 4 cannabis dispensaries. So look at what's going on in Colorado. The economy's on fire. They're right there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason that we can't have some overlap. I also want to give a huge shout out to some of the startups that are going, Descartes Labs, Meow Wolf. These have come out of the ground. We need to do everything we can to encourage these, and they're young people that instead of leaving are staying because they want to work for these
Which
industries.
is good, because we kind of have a net deficit when it comes to population. That's the other problem. But that problem is a result of the fundamental one. There's not much here. Do we have an economic development commission that actually works on that in the abstract and then takes it down to the practical?
Yeah, we've got an economic development department that's an agency, a cabinet level agency. The governor's just appointed Alicia Keys, who is a film person from Albuquerque.
Oh, yeah.
And so she's the one that brought Netflix to New Mexico. And so again, we're 8 days in, but I hear you, and it's, you know, we gotta go.
When I hear the film commission, I think she did a great job at that.
Yeah.
Is she well-grounded in general economics, in international affairs, and things like that, you know, because with all the goodwill in the world, you don't get much.
So, a little bit different answer for me, and this is the difference between Pierre's district and my district. You know, I think the Santa Fe area and New Mexico as a whole, one of the things I really want to see develop is tourism. And there are all sorts of different types of tourism. You know, there's the museums, there's the opera, there's the archaeological resources, there's the outdoor experience, there's culinary tourism. I mean, those are things we can develop that I think is sustainable, and that really, you know, Santa Fe is the focus of that. My district includes Edgewood, it includes Moriarty, it includes the Rio communities. It includes, you know, very different types of communities that are desperate for economic development and well situated for it. Rio Communities has done quite well with a railroad spur that connects to the PNSF railroad line.
Yeah.
And they've created an industrial park.
Yeah.
And they've got all sorts of businesses that want to be right there because they can load their products directly onto a rail car and ship it off. And Edgewood and Moriarty are well situated on Interstate 40. You know, so there are other potentials that we need to look at and we need to support that.
Potential is always there out in the future, and it can be realized. For example, people come here to go to the opera, to sample the food, and all of the usual things. If the government, and this is hypothetical, but I stole it from what's happening in Europe, if the government were to invest in a very large museum with a fabulous collection, Santa Fe could become a real cultural center. It's got its small galleries, it's got its existing site Santa Fe, it's got a world-class opera, and then if it had something like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Louvre, but our version of it, our scale of it, that would be yet another magnet to pull people in. Oh, I don't want to go to Santa Fe, I've been here already. Hey, wait a second, have you heard about the new museum? And I think if the opera got together with the government and some of the other important businesses that wanted to boost their income, I think you could have a magnificent initiative. That's just my opinion.
We got one left, James Mopers, and then we'll call it a night.
Well, I was gonna ask a question about dental therapist project.
Okay.
But I was reading in my professional roofing magazine last night about the need for recycling centers for roofing disposal products, asphalt shingles, TPOs, PVCs. I don't hear a lot of talk about that. And tires, we got tires laying around this state, I mean, clogging our landscape. And talking with a wrecking yard owner down in Albuquerque last year, I said, where do you take your tires? He said, there is no place to take them. And it seems to me But there's a real market being missed here by not trying to bring something like that to the state. And not, just dumping everything into renewables, which is fine, but there are other things that we could be doing that has multifaceted benefits for the economy and also at the same time our environment. I was reading in the article where 1 ton of asphalt shingles will boil down into 1 barrel of oil. So that's a heck of a lot of resources that are going into our landfills that shouldn't be. And there's been a lot of effort nationally by roofing companies to recycle more of their disposed roofing materials and using them, in road-based, road repair projects. And, it's just more than just soda cans and bottles. And even glass. Owens Corning was saying that they have they're having a hard time getting enough glass, which can be converted into insulation for their products. And so I think it's it's something that's being missed and really overlooked.
So we had at the interim Water and Natural Resources Committee meeting in Santa Fe a month or so ago.
Which Matthew chaired.
We had a presentation on recycling paint, and it came from industry. And they want to you charge a small fee when you sell paint, and then if you don't use the paint, you can bring it back to the point of sale, and the industry will create a system of collecting it, and so they can recycle it and dispose of it. So, those are great ideas, and it's certainly, if there's anything we can do to help, I'm sure we'd be interested in that.
All right.
Thank you.
7:55.